you can look in their chest and find the remains of their possessions. So although you don't know who they are or anything about them, you can glean a certain amount of knowledge from what they own. People do not believe that the anchor rope is real. They think it's modern, but it's not. Everything behind glass in the Submerged Museum is as it was found on the ship.
No fear, face was a danger, make no mistakes, we'll pay back his wages. We'll be standing from the cradle to the grave, from the sails to the gunners and the basement. Don't mess with Henry, Henry ain't patient. Takes his cannons, but we fight face to face on. Choke on the cannons, choke on your words. You sink to the depths when the cannons emerge.
Time dragging out, being stretched into hours, memory spinning, swallowing. Thought of death, suffocating, crushing, the need for air, wanting to scream but no one will hear.
The seabed was found to consist of a thick layer of fine silt.
Dizziness, lightheaded, feeling restricted and exhausted, losing all energy, thoughts of losing everything, never hearing the waves crash again, never hearing the voices of people, never hearing birds squawking, scurrying to the surface, freedom, I'm alive, happy and relieved.
Over the course of this season, the divers fully uncovered the remains of the anchor. The divers fully uncovered the remains. Last-minute excavations were undertaken to prepare it for lifting. Earlier in 2005, the Ministry of Defence had made the decision not to dredge the proposed channel on cost grounds. These would therefore be the final dives before backfilling the site to protect the remaining parts of the ship for future excavation. By another generation of maritime archaeologists.
Over 500 men went into the water. Only 35 came out alive.
Feels like time's dragging on, but it's just my life flashing before my eyes. And then, the thought of losing everything, the feeling of wanting to breathe, being underwater, the lack of oxygen, not being able to scream, so I'm forced to keep quiet, but I'm screaming inside. The feeling of suffocating, the pressure, my body closing itself, restricted to move. Feels like time's dragging on, but it's just my life flashing before my eyes. And then, the thought of losing everything, hearing the waves crash, hearing the voices of the men singing and the birds talking, and then restricted to move. Restricted the feeling of wanting to breathe, the feeling of being underwater, the lack of being underwater, not being able to scream, not being able to scream, to be quiet, the thought of losing everything, never hearing the waves crash,
Yeah. Yo, yo.
Hi guys, so behind me is the Mary Rose Museum. This is our second visit, and we're about to interview a lovely gentleman. He's a volunteer of the Mary Rose Museum. Hope you enjoy. Plus, there's a new experience that we've seen, and it's very, very, very entertaining. I very, very much recommend it, and I hope to see you there soon.
Hi, my name is Trevor and I'm a volunteer at the Mary Rose Museum, and I have been since I retired from work in 2010. I think a lot of people are interested in history and probably don't do much about it, but if they're on holiday in this, especially if you're in Portsmouth, there is just so much history here. There's something to interest everyone. You know, you might not be interested in everything in the museum, but you might latch on to one or two little things and think, oh, I never knew that.
What's your favourite part of your job and favourite item in the museum?
Well, I would think my favourite item I like the gun on the upper deck. It's a beautiful gun, absolutely fantastic, and with the English inscription, which fascinates me. We're used to seeing the Latin inscriptions and seeing the translation, but to see the English inscription and the way, the language that it's used to tell you that they're English, you know, and the way they express it, I think is absolutely fantastic. You know, everything behind glass is original. There's no reproductions or the only thing is where some of the metal parts of an item have corroded with the years, and we have the handles, we've just replicated in acrylic. But apart from that, people do not believe that the anchor rope is real. They think it's modern, but it's not. Everything behind glass in the Mary Rose Museum is as it was found on the ship. And so you think about that, you can look in their chests and find the remains of their possessions. So although you don't know who they are or anything about them, you can glean a certain amount of knowledge from what they own. You know, their wealth. I mean, the carpenter is a good example. The carpenter's personal chest, he's got pewter plates and pewter flagon. So that tells us straight away that although he's a carpenter or master carpenter, he's extremely rich, or he got plenty of money, because only the very, very wealthy could afford pewter. And we found his gaming board, his backgammon set, so we know he liked to gamble or play games. Yeah, we have the dice and the leather shaker, and he must have had good eyesight because the size of the dice are so small, but they are perfect dice. Well, officially I think the youngest was 12 and the oldest was 40. So 40 years of 40 years of age, you're an old man. The average age of the crew member would be 24. They were called Yonkers and Grummets. Yonkers is apparently a Dutch word meaning young gentleman. So although they would be boys or young men, they would probably be wealthy, from wealthy families, put to sea to learn and become officers and seamen. The hierarchy, you start obviously with George Carew, the Vice Admiral, and then you had the ship's master, and then you had all the different officers, and then you had the crew. So the ship crew would be on board the ship and they would sail the ship, but the ship was also carrying soldiers. So when she was going into action, there'd be probably twice as many people on board as there would be when the ship was just sailing by itself. Okay. I think one would have liked to have been an officer and a gentleman just for the living conditions, you see. Well, yes, considerably, yeah. Well, you can see on the Mary Rose, no one knows where people slept. But obviously the admiral and the captain and the officers and gentlemen would have had cabins in the stern castle, you see, so they would have had accommodation. But one of the things you've got to remember about the Mary Rose is, although she served for 37 years, out of that 37 years, she's probably at sea and sailing a very, very short period of time. So probably 2/3 of her life, she's laid up in harbour. So the ship will not be at sea, sailing around, doing nothing. So when the ship's got nothing to do, she would be what we call laid up, and there would just be a skeleton crew on board just doing the maintenance of the ship. As the ship rolled over, they could hear the screams of the drowning men, and he's reputed to have said, "Oh, my poor men, drowned like rattans." So, and he was standing next to the wife of George Carew, who he had promoted as to Vice Admiral the day before, or the evening before the Mary Rose sank, and of course the next day he's dead, and he's standing by his widow, you know.
Is a health and safety transition from the Naval Base Safety Group at BAE Systems.
Is that all right? Okay.
Now, a reminder to exercise caution.
So then you've got all of these. Now everything with a circle, loops, anything with a line. Suffocating ground. Now we can destroy these lives taken. Lives of state by state. Patterns, open fire, drifting, sinking. Yeah. People working below. Trapped and dragged down. Manway work demolished within minutes. The monstrosity. The ship rapidly consumed to the depths below, falling into a sinkhole. Fewer than 35 survived. I'm making a base.
I was just laughing at the fact that I can change Ricky's voice on him.
Really funny.
There you go. Back to normal. It's good, isn't it?
No fear, face towards the danger, make no mistakes, we'll play back as spades here. We'll be sailors from the cradle to the grave, to the sail, to the gunners and the pacemen.